Regents Resource Optimization Committee. The press and an announcement of the meeting was sent out last week, and then materials loaded up earlier this week. Hopefully everyone has everything they need in front of them for us to progress through the meeting in a timely manner today. I am going to ask the Honorable Hannah Rivera to please call the roll for us.
Yes, Chair. I will call the roll and note that the 4 college presidents joining us and Chancellor Williams are advisory members, and we are glad they're here with us this morning. So Dr. Figueroa.
Here.
Dr. Handy.
Here.
Dr. Linden.
Present.
Dr. Reese.
Here.
Thank you. Dr. Williams.
Here.
Dr. Fletcher.
Present.
Mr. Cox.
Here.
Ms. Green.
Here.
And Ms. Witten.
Here.
Great. Thank you. A quorum is present.
Thank you so much. So the first thing I wanted to do this morning is kind of kick off with some introductions. And I know that all of us get to see each other on these meetings and sometimes in person at the system office at these meetings. But I thought just as a little bit of an icebreaker for us getting this committee moving forward, it might be interesting to hear from each of you a little bit of a brief introduction. I'd just like for those being able to watch online to know who we are and where we are and what we do. But then I'm going to add a little twist to that. I want each of you to not only tell me who you are and your title and where you're working at this point in the system. I want you to also tell me if you were going back to school right now to a Kctcs program anywhere in the state, what is the program that you would choose to pursue, and something completely different perhaps than what you currently do. So let's start at the top of the list there. Dr. Figueroa.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. Yeah, Fernando Figueroa. I'm the president of Gateway Community and Technical College here in Northern Kentucky. And if I had my druthers, I would go back and do welding.
Awesome. Dr. Handy.
Sure, I'm Ty Handy, and if Fernando goes back and does welding, I'm not going to hire him to do any work at my house, that's for sure. I'm president of Jefferson Community and Technical College. I've been in the role I'm in my 7th year now, and I've got 21 years total as a college president in 3 other states. And if I were going back to do anything, I would quickly join Kentucky Fame and work through that process and go back. My roots are in manufacturing for a couple years to begin with, and I would go back and go back into the manufacturing field. But I don't think I'm going to actually do that.
That's fair. Dr. Linden.
Yes, hello. I'm Dr. Jennifer Linden, president at Hazard Community and Technical College, and I've been with Kctcs really since it began, and with Kentucky Tech before that. So thinking about all the programs and realizing now that I am somewhat over, not totally over, my fear of blood, I would go back into the nursing profession. That's the profession that I think I would choose because I love caring for other people, and I would choose nursing and go the healthcare route.
Awesome. We can always use one more. Dr. Reese.
I'm Dr. Anton Reese, president of West Kentucky Community Technical College, 5.5 years in. I was with the system prior from 90 to 2003 as Minority Affairs Director and Dean of Students. If I had to go back, I would definitely do automotive. Just got some work done on my car yesterday, and you can make a small fortune in that area for sure.
Very good. Dr. Williams.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Chris Williams. I serve as chancellor, which in our system is really similar to provost. So in my area, I have academics, student services, workforce and economic development. I also have the pleasure of having the whole enrollment funnel with marketing, and then our important research and policy analysis group that helps provide the data that keeps us on track. So I've had the privilege of working at 3 of our Kctcs colleges, Hazard, Henderson, and Hopkinsville. I really enjoyed seeing the state that way. If I were going back to one of our Kctcs programs, I would probably go back to where I started my college degree and either take the vet tech program at Owensboro or the equine program at Bluegrass.
Very good. And I'll go next just by default of the list there. So I'm Wendy Fletcher, and I'm the chair of this committee and secretary to the Kctcs Board of Regents. It has just been such a privilege for the last 3 years to work with this incredible group of people. I live and work in Moorhead, Kentucky, where I own and operate Main Street Medical Associates, and am a co-owner and entrepreneur in a consulting healthcare business called the Sherwin Group, where we educate and help practices, particularly family practices, with nurse practitioners and physician assistants involved to do medication-assisted treatment for opioid use disorder patients, as well as work on workflows and reimbursement optimization for family practice clinics. So if I were going back, I would really struggle with choosing. There are so many incredible programs in Kctcs. I love to bake and cook, and so culinary seems like it would be a really good choice for me. But I also have this desire that once I retire from nursing and being an advanced practice nurse, to maybe build furniture someday. So I'm a little torn between culinary and woodworking. I would really love to be able to do that. My husband has all the tools. I just don't really know how to use them. So that might be my second career. Mr. Cox, you're up.
Russ Cox, Norton Healthcare. Been in healthcare since 1981. I think if I were going to go back, I would just figure out how to terrorize all of these presidents who are on this call right now in some way. And I'm sure there's people like me that are out there, but no, I tend to agree. I think there's so many programs that jump out at you, and I can't even envision not being in something that's healthcare related. So I'm going to have to say that's probably, I know it breaks the rules of what we were doing, but I just can't even imagine being in there. But I'll tell you, I think what the future holds for the nursing profession, I'd have a hard time not going in that direction.
Very good. Again, jump on in. We can always use another one.
Well, we could actually use about 500 here.
Just in your hospital. That's
Yes.
right. That's right. Miss Kim.
Yes, good morning. I'm Kimberly Green, and I'm a Human Resources Specialist at Somerset Community College. This is my first term as a staff regent. I started my term in fall of 2021, and it's a privilege to serve. I want to thank the presidents who are here today, and also for their attendance at the last board meeting. If I had to go back and do a program through Kctcs, I think my choice would lean towards one of the technical programs. I don't know specifically what it would be, but something working with my hands for sure.
Very good. Thank you. And Miss Witten.
Good morning. Brianna Witten. I'm the faculty from Maysville Community and Technical College. I'm an English professor. And there's so many programs, so many wonderful programs that the whole system is bringing in now. Aviation mechanics intrigues me. What an amazing program. So I literally know nothing about it, but I would dig in and try to learn as much as I could. What a cool program for Kentucky.
Very good. Thank you all so much. I think it's important that you know the folks that you're working with, and we all share that passion for Kctcs and making sure that the communities around us understand what a treasure trove of certificates and degrees and credentials that Kctcs has across the state. I think there's really no reason in this day and age that anyone who wants to be working isn't, and we can be such a resource for our communities. And so I appreciate all that you all are doing, and to that effort, this committee has been put together to try to help to optimize the resources of Kctcs. As most of you on this call know, Kctcs has received one of its largest state appropriations ever. We want to make sure that we're being great stewards of the funding that we've been given from the state and the funding that we get from our donors, which is also so important to the success of our students and to our colleges. And we have been given quite a charge. I would like for Chancellor Williams, if you could, to read that charge out loud for everyone to hear, and then we're going to jump right into it today.
My pleasure, thank you. In support of greater student success and college efficacy, the Kctcs Board of Regents charges the Resource Optimization Committee to review all facets of college and system administration and develop a plan and timeline to submit to the board by May 31st, 2022. Given the 60-day timeframe, the plan may include recommendations for further research. Within the framework of the Kctcs Strategic Plan 2022 through 2026 and the structure envisioned by Kctcs President Paul Zarapata of a more equitable, agile, responsive, and streamlined system, the committee will examine the following scope of resources: human capital, financial capital, and physical capital. The committee will look at specific strategies to positively move the organization forward by improving ways in which we value and use our human capital, improving efficiencies in how we manage our financial capital, and determining how we will use, expand, redeploy, or dispose of our physical capital. And that committee charge is from March 25th, Chair Regent Lisa Damaris, Board of Regents.
Thank you so much. So the next part of our presentation is just to review the statutory and bylaws and the policy references around what this committee will be charged with doing. I know that we've seen these before, but just as a reminder, I did want to highlight KRS 164-003, Section 2, subsection F, which calls for us to be an efficient, responsive, and coordinated system of providers that deliver educational services. So if anyone, asks, well, what are you all doing and what is the whole point of this? And, how is this any different than what we're doing day to day? I would really kind of refer them back to this. I think that while we have wonderful people working within our system, our people are our most valuable resource, and we have some very long time faculty and staff members, and many of you, as you just introduced yourselves, years and years with the system, who have worked so devotedly and trying to make sure that the system is successful and that our students leave with valuable skills and workforce experiences. There are always, from where I come from, my quality background tells me there are always ways to improve, even on things that seem to not be broken. I think that being more efficient, being more responsive, being more coordinated is really the goal. And we literally have a statutory charge to do those things. So, Hannah, if you will go to the next slide. We also want to make sure that we're looking at ourselves inwardly. We hear a lot of feedback outwardly, but we want to make sure that as we progress, that this committee, along with the entire board and each of you at your individual colleges, are able to periodically evaluate the system's progress, that we're able to use data to kind of move ourselves forward. That really is my hope with this committee, is that we will take a hard look at the numbers and try to find ways where we can be a little more efficient and maybe streamline some processes across the system, particularly after our last board meeting where we heard the presentations that tended to lean more toward an accreditation conversation. This is much broader than an accreditation conversation. This is really about taking a deep dive into the numbers, looking at what we're doing, how we're doing it, figuring out where a policy tends to lend itself more toward tradition than toward data and utilization and outcomes information. And again, just to make sure that we are progressing strategically as we move forward. So you're going to see a lot of data float through this committee, and we get a lot of data from our amazing office. Dr. Williams's crew is just so important and so vital to what we're about to embark on here, as they are to everything we do every day in the system. And we're going to be hearing from Alicia here in just a moment, but We are going to be asking for a lot of reports, perhaps from some of you on this committee, perhaps from some of our external stakeholders in this process. We're going to be looking at things to determine whether or not we have appropriate numbers of divisions and departments, bureaus, and offices. Again, that is our statutory foundation and our charge moving forward. It's like Hannah's reading my mind today. So the governing boards of each institution shall periodically review the assets of the institution and shall sell and convey under KRS 164A575 those assets not necessary to for implementing the institutional mission. So as we get into the conversation about property a little later on, again, this is our statutory charge to do so. One of the things that I heard loud and clear from the presidents who presented in the last meeting, and again, thank you all for being there. It is absolutely vital to our board that we hear from each of you and that we have really good communication, open and honest communication with one another about not only the history of the colleges coming forward into what we're trying to move in, with moving our students successfully into their futures, but we also want to make sure that we are respectful of the communities in which these colleges are and the history that we need to preserve, but at the same time helping those communities, just as we are, to be equitable and agile and responsive to the needs of future generations. And so again, knowing that we have a statutory authority and a statutory charge to continue the colleges, maintaining them in these locations, is vitally important. And so working with this committee is going to help us to be able to assure that those colleges can remain intact going forward. Now I need to catch up on my other screen. Give me just a second. Okay, and the next slide. Okay. I have one more, Hannah, on mine. I think it maybe got left out of that one. Board bylaws. There we go. So the Board of Regents shall promulgate regulations to ensure the proper disbursement and the use of state appropriations as well as other monies collected and received. And that is really our mission, is to take a look at everything and make sure that we are utilizing those resources appropriately. So. Okay. All right, Hannah. So the next item on the agenda is going to jump into some data, and I am going to ask Dr. Williams and Alicia to present the information that I have requested there. It is on, the first one is on student enrollment, and we're going to take a look at a spreadsheet that they have put together about online trends by college for students who are attending Kctcs schools.
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. I'm going to ask Alicia Crouch to walk us through this. It is by college, and it gives a nice picture over the last several years. So Alicia, if you would, please.
Sure. So what has been pulled together here is the data that we report to the federal government. So that is the Integrated Post-Secondary Education Data System, referred to as IPEDS. And in the fall of 2012, IPED started collecting information from public institutions and private institutions nationwide about the mode of delivery of courses. So whether students were taking classes online or in person. So what you have here is by college for the last 10 years, how many students are taking their courses exclusively online in each fall term versus how many are taking a mixture of online and in-person courses, as well as people who are not taking any online courses. So you can see, and Hannah, if you would scroll down to the end of this, there's the data is by college, but at the end there is a Kctcs summary level data on here. And so what you can really see from the summary data is that there has been an increasing proportion of students taking classes entirely online. in the 10 years that we have been reporting this data to the federal government. And then that was heavily impacted by the pandemic. So you can see that jump from a little less than a quarter fully remote to over a third fully remote during that pandemic period. So that is that first set of numbers there. You can see the counts of the number of students taking classes fully online. So that's about 25,000 during the pandemic. And then that next set of columns, what you really see is the people who are taking a mixture of classes, both online and in person. So that has held a little more steady over time. That real adjustment has been between the total in person and then the total online. You can see that when we first started reporting this, over 60% of our students were fully in person. And then during the pandemic, that dropped to around 50%.
And Alicia, that is unduplicated numbers. Am I correct?
That is correct. So what you see in the last column there is the total head count of students enrolled for credit in 4 credit classes at Kctcs. So that can include students who are credential seeking, high school students, and work students.
Thank you.
Visiting students, etc.
And that's your first set of data, Chair Fletcher.
So there are a couple of things that jump out at me as I look over this spreadsheet. And just, again, this is first glance for all of us, get this data in front of us and really look at it. But one of the things I noticed, and Alicia, just make sure that I'm reading this correctly. So in the fall of 2012, Kctcs had 96,590 total students seeking credit or credential. Is that correct?
That is correct. We were just coming out of the recession, so we had a really a big bump in enrollment during that period.
Okay, thank you. And that historical perspective is really important as we continue down the line here. So today we have 69,950, so about a 30,000 student shift. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay, but at the same time, almost 40%, let's see, no, that would be 37, almost 60% of students taking some courses online.
Correct.
So that lends the question, how many students do we have actively on campuses or in labs on kind of a daily basis? This, to me, brings out 2 questions. If we have this many students online, how are we ensuring that our online programs are the best, the high quality programs that we expect for our students and their success? And the second question is, how much space do we have currently that perhaps is not being fully utilized because so many students have chosen the modern option of being able to be educated online? So that's 2 of the things that as a committee, I hope that we will be able to really dig into and look at as we're setting some goals for the outcomes of this committee's work. Alicia, I really appreciate that information, and I may be reaching back out to dig into those numbers even further. But I do think this is a really great start, a really great snapshot of actual data. These are not estimates or guesses. These are literal numbers that we're reporting to the government. And Alicia, when you report these impact everything from federal funding to financial aid, those types of things, correct?
So we are required in order to get financial aid to report these numbers. I wouldn't say that, funding is dependent on the numbers that are reported, but we are required to report them in order to receive funding.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that clarification. Do any of the regents or any of the committee members have any questions or any comments about this data? Dr. Linden, is there anything in particular that jumps out at you about this information or historical perspective that you could lend given your time with the system on this data?
Sure, I'm really just going to concur with what some of the others have said. Certainly at HCTC, we saw an influx of students in 2012 when we had the beginning of many major layoffs with the mining industry. And then we peaked somewhere after that, 17, 18, 19, and then we've kind of declined a little bit in enrollment since then. Certainly, some of it was exacerbated by COVID. And we have been picking back up As you recall, I mentioned in my presentation a couple of weeks ago about how enrollment is beginning to stabilize all across the system. And so we are seeing an increase in numbers. I think in 2021, we had a total number of unduplicated students at HCTC at 3581. That's one of our lowest as far as total unduplicated, and that's probably not in some of the data as pulled. But then this year in 21-22, we have a total number of unduplicated students of 4,096. So it has certainly increased and grown. If you look back to 1920 pre-pandemic, we had 4,817. So it's not back up to pre-pandemic. And we all know that across the colleges, but it is beginning to stabilize. And certainly we're trying to strategically utilize the spaces that we have, really look at what our local economies need, make sure that we're offering the appropriate types of training as far as hands-on training and in-person training. Certainly, you can never substitute hands-on in-person training for some of our technical programs, some of our allied health fields. And in the fall, we'll begin to offer more in-person classes. And I hope that that will help us with increased enrollment. I think it will. And also, of course, we've all got a number of other initiatives going on, but I think certainly that 2012 historical perspective is helpful, as well as the perspective with the pandemic. I think we all have a number of initiatives to help grow enrollment in the future. And again, really looking strategically at what we are offering on our campuses and just being flexible. You know, that's one thing that I think all of us have learned through the pandemic is flexibility. So offering not only online classes, but hybrid classes where you attend in person some of the time, or flex classes where you can either log on or attend in person. And one that's been really popular with us is the live online, where you log in, everyone logs in at 11 o'clock, say on a Monday, and you still get that interaction somewhat. So I do think some people are still a little timid about coming back to in person, but we're certainly hopeful that things are going to improve.
That's wonderful. Thank you for that. So one of the things we talked about in the last board meeting, and one of the things I wanted to explore a little further in this committee, is that it seems that across the campuses, that agility and being able to be flexible and being able to offer what the students need in that area is so powerful. Is it as successful across the system as it could be? You know, that is that working really, really well in Hazard, but maybe not so well? I see President Fernando's hand up, and I'll get to you there in just a second. You know, is it working as well at Gateway, or is it working as well at Western? And part of the efficiency and streamlining of processes for the system that I would like for us to explore is really looking at the data and seeing where students are being most successful in these sometimes very similar and sometimes not so similar programs that are all kind of under this big umbrella. And can we find a mechanism to evaluate those programs and make sure that students across the system are equally successful regardless of the setting that they are receiving that education in? So be thinking towards some goals that we can set for this committee to achieve in a very short period of time. Speaking of agile, we're going to have to be very agile in what we're charged with here as well. So President Fernando, I see your hand up there.
Yes, thank you, Regent Fletcher. You know, I think that, you know, this conversation is also with the context of Kentucky's broadband access and the number of folks that have reliable, consistent, and the quality of broadband access that allows for the kind of information and how, you know, the files that we send back and forth, especially if you're in a graphic design program or anything that require high video usage, that's going to be really critical. Just having online is not enough. The other is that space and time work differently at a college, just in the context of that you can't have a critical needed lab space and then say that lab space will then be used as X, Y, and Z through the day. Sometimes these are dedicated spaces, and the instruction may be, especially as we get into more work-learn, as we've learned with our advanced manufacturing, we'll have times when our advanced manufacturing area is full, and then times when it looks like there's nobody there because they're working. And so working with the companies to establish, ways of shifts and sector involvement. Something else that I think would be of value is, I think each of the colleges, because each is separately accredited at this time, has requirements from the Southern Association of Colleges and Schools to maintain, because of the federal guidelines, certain things in terms of quality of instruction, effectiveness, assessment of online instruction, as well as security, which is the other thing about online, is the more we go online, the more we become vulnerable to cybersecurity questions and concerns. So that's something to add to the equation. And we think about scale, right? And this is the way I've always looked at the system office, is the system office focused on those elements that can get us to scale. And so we do have, individual quality controls. It could be a real success if we are able to get a process that all the colleges have confidence in, for a framework of how you put one together, how you develop it, how do you assess it, and then to have, with the use of ORPA, the ability of how do we create kind of core samplings of the online, instead of having to assess every course all the time, so that we have a predictable way of demonstrating value as well as checking in on how we're doing. But we all use the rubrics, Quality Matters or something else, and we're always testing against our advisory groups as well.
And that's the next piece of data that I think we don't have, is you may have that within your individual colleges, and how does that look across the system? And are there areas where we could improve things or enhance things in one area of the system? Again, individual colleges, one massive system. We just want to make sure that across the system, and I love that the support for the infrastructure is really what you need. That's very valuable information for us. So also about the labs and the work-learn program, I tell students that I precept every day that they're not going to learn everything they need to know in a classroom, nor are they going to learn it in a single clinical rotation. Most of what they're going to learn, they're going to learn on the job, hands-on, once they have, received that credential. And I think that's a really important point. But also in that, the ability to be able to access utilization of space in a fair way, and to make sure that we aren't closing down labs that need to be there or need to be there to be that agile and flexible system that we're hoping to be. So we'll be talking about space and property a little later.
One last thing, and I've said this to my community, and I'd like to say it on record here, is I challenge any other organization move as fast as we did to get within 2 weeks from our normal operations of classes to the majority online. And we did it with fidelity, and we were concerned about student progress and success. And I think across the board, we were very successful in retaining our students during a pandemic. And I think that should be noted.
Absolutely. And kudos to you and to everyone else in this call that had a hand in that. Regent Whitten, we had a little side conversation about online, and you had mentioned to me the metrics and the rubrics and those things. Can you speak to the excellent course content, I'm sorry that I don't know enough about that, but can you speak to that?
No, absolutely, you're fine. What Regent Fletcher is referring to is the ECP rubric for Blackboard Ultra. As many of you on this call are aware, we are all transitioning to the fall of 22 from Blackboard Learn courses to Ultra, which is the new format. It's more student friendly, more modularized. I love that word. And the idea behind this is that we create consistency across the system for our students, whether they're from Hazard to Henderson, Maysville to Madisonville, that they are familiar with the format of our courses and the way they're going to be set up. So I know different colleges, and President Figueroa, perhaps you might have referenced this a little bit as well, that you have quality assurance metrics at your own institutions. I know Maysville, I'm part of a team and a group that works on it at Maysville. We have completed the first self-reflection process to allow people who have transitioned to Ultra to self-reflect and include that in their PPE this year. Moving forward next year, we're going to actually be embedding a teaching and learning model into other people's courses to check on our online quality assurance metrics as related to that ECP rubric from Blackboard Ultra. So we already have that measure. I feel like that's something that's very simple across the system that we could kind of all get on board with, and I'm sure different colleges are doing different things. Regent Fletcher, I think that perhaps it might be looking at the efficiency of that and seeing how we could maybe incorporate that as a system.
Okay, thank you. So that maybe is a goal that we could work toward, or one we can at least discuss moving forward. Dr. Handy.
Yes, I'd like to make 2 points about the things that have been said. One of the things we've learned at Jefferson that we knew, but we just didn't realize how acute it was, is the digital divide. And the issue as the most diverse institution in the state of Kentucky, Jefferson, with more underrepresented minority students than any other college or university in the state, we were quite surprised, in fact, stunned by the inability of the students who need us the most to be able to access the services that needed to be provided. We did a lot of things. I won't go into that to try to remediate that problem. But the problem exists, and it's a cultural, and it's a societal, and it's a community issue. And the more we gravitate towards all things online, the more we leave people behind and kick some of them to the curb. And so I think we have to be very, very careful and deliberate about those things. The second point, I think, and I'll use Russ here as an example of this, is while Russ is probably very interested in how many people we have coming into the programs, he's much more interested in how many people we have successfully completing. Because that's his pipeline, and our students are probably much more interested in being able to complete. And so I simply want to say that what we've learned over time, and we're doing our best to close the gap at Jefferson, is there's about a 10% differential in each mode of instruction that you see there. Our highest, most successful mode of instruction is the hybrid format at Jefferson. It is about 10% higher in terms of a success rate, and we define success as a C or better, not a D or better at Jefferson, about 10% higher than the traditional teaching method, what I'll call chalk and talk, right? And chalk and talk is about 10% higher than fully online. And that's across all our student body. So we're looking at a 20% gap in success rates when we have things online. And that's a major concern. When you combine that with the digital divide, while we embrace the online learning mechanism, we're concerned that if it stays at 35 to 40%, that's going to have impacts on graduation rates and on student success rates. And it's tough to engage a freshman or a sophomore in work that requires them to be that much more responsible, because they have to make the initiative to do the work in an online mode a lot more than when we're there with them or helping them. So just want to make those 2 points because I do think they're critical. Student success for us has become our benchmark of performance, not enrollment. And that's just the way we've transitioned.
I so appreciate that perspective, and I would agree with 110% with that. We are supposed to be about student success, and those numbers are pretty impressive. A little worrisome that there is such a divide. I think there are many people who say that online learning, is just as effective, but obviously in your case, in your convenient sample there at Jefferson, you're already noting that there is quite a differential. And so I think that is another point very important for us as a committee and as a board and as a population here moving forward to keep in mind. So, okay, so with those things being said, if we were to go ahead and start talking along these lines about, I know we have essential standards for online learning. I know that the rubrics exist. Maybe Dr. Williams could speak to this, or one of the presidents. What are we doing to assure that the rubrics are being utilized, that the student success is being measured in these different formats? And moving forward, what kind of goals could we set as a committee that we would like to see for student success? For example, would we want to set a goal of a quality improvement program or a quality program that ensures that every course meets that rubric for excellence for online learning, pretty much from, day one of the course. One of the things and some of the feedback that I've received, perhaps locally, is that some students go into their class and on day one, their entire course and all their assignments and their syllabus and their rubrics and everything is uploaded day one. They know what they're getting into from the first day. And then others say, they might not find out about an assignment until a week before, 2 weeks before. It's not all uploaded from the beginning. So would that be a kind of goal that we could set for student success? So it's twofold, the quality improvement program or the quality assurance program, looking at all the online courses across the system. Certainly, it sounds like you're doing something similar within the individual colleges, but could the system office support a quality assurance program? And then could we also make sure that in that quality assurance program that we're looking at cultural competency and that we're making sure that we are meeting the needs of the various populations that we serve and ensuring that we are equitable and inclusive in those courses as well. What are your all's thoughts? I know that was a super long sentence.
Can I jump in maybe with the
Yes.
starting place?
Yes.
So, as you know, Regent Fletcher, we operate a lot through shared governance, a model that we use in higher education to ensure faculty who are most directly involved in this, direct interaction with the students are involved in how we move forward in creating new programs. And we also use peer teams. So a voting representative from each college are engaged in our online learning peer team. And they meet monthly, work on issues just like this one. I will say that historically, we have not looked at success data such as grades across all the colleges. The colleges have tended to do that on their own, but certainly we have the means and opportunity to do that. And that may be one way that we can allow each college to sort of gauge itself against some system level by discipline, for example. All English classes, if you look at classroom classes and online classes, here are the success rates by college and also even by under-resourced or underrepresented student if we wanted to take that equity approach. So my thought would be that although it takes a bit longer when you engage everybody in the process to develop it, that we charge that online learning peer team and through them, the faculty senate and the academic council to come up with, how do we better look at this at the system level so each college can gauge how it's doing against the rest of its peers. Rather than, mandating some level, because classroom classes can be bad too. They can be fabulous or they can be bad. Online classes can be fabulous or they can be bad. It really comes down to that faculty member and the way that they present their materials. And I think it would behoove us in some ways to take an even larger look. While online is important, the quality of all our courses are important, and we would have an opportunity maybe to think about how to gauge that. So I would just start the conversation there and invite Brianna and the presidents maybe to comment on that.
Mm-hmm. Dr. Handy, I see your hand.
Sure, I would support that recommendation. I think that's a really good idea. I do think, and we talk a lot about the flaws of the performance funding model, and one of those is it's a base comparison among the colleges when we know we're all at different starting points, and it doesn't give any credit towards improvement. And so I would like to see us look also at trend data within each institution when we're doing that. So an institution that goes from, I'm going to make this up, a 50% success rate to a 70% success rate is probably actually doing better than an institution that goes from a 70% rate to a 72% rate. But they don't get the same credit for that effort or what have you. And so I think it's as much the reason it's been an internal look is we know that we need to improve, and when we benchmark against ourselves, and we need to not give that up. That's critical, in my opinion. But I would support that recommendation. I think that would be a a good thing to talk about. And I especially would support it in the distance learning environment because we do have more crossover students in that environment between colleges than in the other than in the other modes of instruction. And so being able to have a consistent platform and have students know what to expect and to maybe have a rule where they're assessed within 3 weeks of starting the semester or whatever that is, so they actually have an idea of what assessment's going to look like. Things of that sort are best practices, and we ought to be making sure that all of our online courses are engaging in that.
That is a fantastic summary, and thank you for taking all those words and putting them so eloquently together, because
Don't do that often.
I do agree. I do agree. It does need to be a system-wide look, and because we want to be able to offer, even to maybe students in far eastern Kentucky, something that's being offered in western Kentucky, we want that consistency and that continuity of programming across the system so that those students east, west, north to south know whenever they enroll in a course what that course is going to look like because they've seen it before in their own college. I think that's just absolutely paramount to our mission. And to be able to offer more programming across the state, not just within the local colleges. So thank you all very much for that. I think that'll be a good goal moving forward. So we'll try to formalize what the wording of that goal is. Dr. Williams, please help with that to make sure that we are all on the same page there.
Okay.
That's excellent. So the second part of what I was trying to flesh out there with the differences in a lot of these courses is, are we being consistent across the system with ensuring equity, diversity, and inclusion? And are we making sure that at least in core component courses that we are meeting the standards that we have set forth and that we say that we want to honor, so that all of our students get what they need within those courses and learn perhaps about populations that are dissimilar to their own? Can we be thinking toward or setting a goal going forward to ensure that our courses are exactly that? Dr. Reese.
Hands off, yeah.
Yep, Dr. Reese.
Yes, thank you, Regent Fletcher. So linking back actually to the prior topic and then connecting to your question, a couple things I was going to add on there too is the retention rates and the major that students are in. Because at the end of the day, I always get a little worried with them. So the online is a mode of delivery. Let's just talk for a moment about our students, right? So Ty did a great analogy of the urban piece. For the rural colleges, we got the lower socioeconomic and access points, right, piece as well too. So I think it is important that we also look in terms of the very majors that students are pursuing, and that's a component of advising, obviously, tracking that sort of number. Second, by way of access points, I think of my most far western small counties. So type system is so important, which our research also bears us out. The hybrid model actually, I believe or suspect that part of that success though is there's something about that in-person access to the various individuals and resources on site. I think there's a component there that obviously not all of our students will be able to secure, but I think really looking at not only the mode of delivery, but those kind of mixed methods, I guess is the word that I'm looking for. Does the mixed method approach bolster the success rates? Will be my key observation.
Another good metric to add to that goal. Thank you so much for that. Yes, important to look at. Okay, I see Dr. Linden.
Yes, I do want to go back to Dr. Reese's point. When we're talking about equity and inclusion, I do think having those mixed methods of delivery are so important, because speaking to the rural area that we're in, and there was a point made about the broadband earlier. Of course, many of our students do not have access to broadband. There's been much issue with bringing the broadband to that last mile, as they say, up in the hollers. And so many times our campuses in those local areas, and we do have 5 here at Hazard, but many times those campuses are the only place that student can access broadband. And so it's important. They may be taking a class online, but they may come to the computer lab at that campus to take that class and do that coursework. But I do think that's another reason why those mixed methods, those hybrid courses are more successful, maybe in some cases than totally online for some students, because they are able to come to campus on those class meeting days and get what they need and talk with the instructor. But all of these supports that we offer to our students are so important when we're talking about retention. We have to really shore up what we're offering as far as supports online. We have Brain Fuse, we have other variety of resources for our students to get tutoring and other assistance. And we've certainly expanded upon that and really grown and gotten some best practices throughout the pandemic. But those supports, both online and in person, many of us are doing that retention work that was spoken about. And they teach you in Introduction to Business that it is easier to retain your current customer than to attract new ones. So I think that we have to really look at those basics and what are we doing to retain those students and help get them across the finish line and help get them to success. And that's both with academic and non-academic supports. But yes, I totally agree that having a variety of methods does help us, since we're talking about equity and inclusion. It really is important for students who are living in rural areas and maybe living in poverty situations to have flexibility with their courses and the modality.
And part-time versus full-time, right?
Absolutely.
I think that's the other part too. That's a real important equation. The success rates of part-time students tend to be more challenged than full-time. So I think that's another part of the formula as well.
But so many of our students choose to be part-time, and so ensuring that success with shoring up the systems to support them is exactly what we're here for. So that's awesome. Mr. Cox, I see your hand up, sir, and I'm sorry if I got out of order in responding.
That's okay. I just was hoping someone could provide me with a consistent definition for those of us who don't deal in your world. Can you just kind of help me understand the difference between hybrid and synchronous and asynchronous? And I guess what I'm getting to is we hear, out here, we hear a lot of terms, and I'm not sure that I fully understand how you all look at the world. So I'm sorry to slow you down, but it helps me to understand how we view it. I know how others view it, but how do you all view the world of hybrid, synchronous, and asynchronous?
I appreciate the question. Just very briefly, asynchronous online education means the student goes in at their convenient time. Synchronous means that all students are joining in, almost like this Teams meeting, into the online space at the same time and having much like a classroom setting. So those are 2 words. The other set of words is the amount of time a class is online. So a class is fully face-to-face, it's fully online, or it's hybrid, meaning that there's some combination of in-person and online classes. And that can be a number of percentages. We use normally that it has to be over 50% or 60% to really be considered more of an online class. But it might be that you don't ever go in the classroom during the week, you're online all week, and then you come in on a weekend to work in a lab and do some clinical things. So three versions. People could argue the percentage of each, but face-to-face in the classroom, always online, or some combination in between is hybrid.
A common model for hybrid, I think, it's not probably the most common model, is certainly at Jefferson, is when we used to have classes that met 2 days a week. Now they meet face-to-face once, with the other class being fully online, the other class session, making it a 50-50 split between the two. And students do like that because they're getting the hand-holding they need face-to-face, but they're also using the technology and the convenience of being able to join from wherever.
So let me ask a follow-up question to that, if you don't mind. And I appreciate the definition. So if I am asynchronous, I choose when I want to get online and hit the content and watch it, and if I want to do half of it and then come back and do half of it, kind of like I do Netflix sometimes. So what do we think about the efficacy of that? You all talked about how students do percentage-wise better with some methodologies than others. So if you were ranking how we're successful or how our students are successful from the most successful to the least successful of all these models that we've talked about, how does that play out?
So we just sort of reimagined our online courses. We had two systems, one that was pretty much completely self-paced. You did it on your own. You had some instruction or some interaction with an instructor, but it was, you did it within a time period, and the entire materials were essentially made available to you during that time. That was probably our least effective. We have gotten rid of that system, and some of those classes have, merged in with regular college offerings, and they're sort of revisiting how to do those so they're more effective. I think you could argue about the synchronous, where people are meeting in a class and then also doing work outside of class, just as they would in a classroom, where they're maybe seeing an instructor twice a week and being in with other classes. That's very engaging. It's hard to say right now because research over the past 2 years has shown that because of COVID and the way that we've been, there are non-academic barriers, the things that are getting in the way of their instruction, that none of this is, as effective as it might be. I mean, students are less engaged in many ways and having trouble. So I think we would have to tease that out without just saying one versus another. I will say on the asynchronous, it doesn't mean the entire class is made available to you. Faculty, try to ensure that you understand a piece of the class before they add the next piece of the class. So where Regent Fletcher was talking about, that different faculty members make different things available at any given time. That's true. In those effective practices, there are things that are available at the beginning, including your syllabus, an introduction to the instructor, a welcome, some understanding of, the expectations of the course, what you're going to learn in the course, all those kinds of things. But a faculty member may also expect that you have completed this video before the next piece comes available to you. They manage the way that you get those course materials. So there's really a lot of opportunity for the faculty member to really gauge where the student is, to require things like postings to discussion boards and things before they move on, for example. And so it allows a lot of flexibility. That student may go in at midnight when their kids are asleep, but it also may be gated in a way to ensure the student's actually interacting with the materials.
And we never want to get in the way of academic freedom of our faculty folks. We never want to get in the way of the progress of the students. But perhaps with the quality program that we're talking about setting as a goal, one of the metrics would be that all course materials for any given assignment would be posted within a certain number of days of that assignment being due, for example. Not what the assignment is or how they open the course to the students, but that the student have ample, notification and don't feel like things are, just popping up in the course. And we all have been there and done that. We know how that works. Those of us who've taught know how that works. But, there's a variety of ways, and we would leave that to those faculty folks to consult and let us know what the best practices there would be. But I'm just saying, as we move forward, whether it's synchronous, asynchronous, or hybrid, we set a standard for what those courses would look like across the system. Do you know, Dr. Williams, or anyone else on any of the presidents on the call, and thinking about how Russ presented that question, do we know if there's any literature that supports the impact or the effect of like soft skills on students who are completely asynchronous versus those who are in person? Like, for example, showing up to work on time is very important. if you're never required to show up to class on time because everything is asynchronous, like, has anybody ever looked at those sorts of things? Do we know if there's literature out there to support, or, one type of learning over another when it comes to actual outcomes on the job after the credential is awarded?
There is literature on just about everything. So we certainly can go out and do a literature search and see what might be available. I'm happy to work with our online learning and research folks on that. I don't want to speak to it, but I would also maybe point out that so much of that is really dependent on the student. That part-time student Dr. Reese was talking about may be working, the only reason they're taking the 6 credit hours is because they're working, 15, 40, however many hours a week. And so they are really, trying to tease out whether their online course in any way impacted the skills that they were learning at work might be really difficult. But we can certainly look and see what might be available.
It could be a good marketing tool too, if we're able to say, hey, students who take our hybrid courses and are in class 1 day a week on our campuses seem to later be more successful when it comes to, those types of skills. I'm just trying to think out of the box. Okay. All right. Any other discussion? Oh, is there another hand or?
Yeah, this is
Yes.
Ty. Just
okay.
real quickly, I also think we have to be very careful because we tend to approach this, I do as well, from our own experiences with online sort of activities. And our experience is not consistent with the experience of the typical freshman, sophomore. So I've taught all the way up the chain, and certainly along the chain of undergraduate, freshman, sophomore to junior, senior to graduate student, there is a huge difference in the ability of to engage the learner in the online process when you're dealing with a student who is a freshman or a sophomore. And I'm not sure age matters that much. What matters is the amount of college experience they've had and their ability to learn the college process. And so I'm fundamentally concerned about too much asynchronous work and then too much fully online work. Because I think it really sets the bar high to create a successful student at the freshman, sophomore level. Only the best can really hang in there and do well in that model, I think.
And that is a great point. Thank you so much for that. That's a wonderful segue to our next, unless anyone has anything further on this. And Russ, did you get your question answered? Yes. Okay. That's a wonderful segue to the next item on our agenda, which is to take a look at dual credit course data. And again, I'm going to call on Dr. Williams and her staff to present this. But as Dr. Handy was just pointing out, the success of the student with online learning really depends on that student's maturity level, their ability to handle being completely independent and asynchronous online. Someone mentioned the hand holding that they sometimes need. That's often the case with several of our non-traditional students as well. It really can be any student that needs a little extra attention or that face-to-face interaction. Having been an instructor who taught hybrid, I can tell you I always enjoyed the day getting together with the students because I could see the deer in headlights if something I was saying was not making sense versus, putting something up online and just hoping that they get it. I always enjoyed that coming back together and being in the group and in the room and hearing the interactions between the students as to what they were learning and not learning. So I totally get that. I do not know how first-time learners in a fully online class really get it. And so that's always been a question and a concern that I've had. But I certainly have that as a mother of 2 children who took dual credit courses in various facilities. I can attest to the fact that they were quite different depending on what they were taking, who was teaching it, and what institution they were getting those credits from. I also saw a pretty big difference in how they performed if they were performing with one of the educators on their own high school campus versus an educator at another institution that they perhaps did not have any face-to-face interaction with. So to that, I have asked for information about dual credit courses and how many students that we have that are on our campuses taking those courses with our instructors or professors, and how many are doing that from the seat of their high school. And so that's the information we're about to see now. So, Dr. Williams?
Thank you, Dr. Fletcher. I'm going to set a stage and then ask Alicia to speak to the numbers. First, I want to remind folks that we have student classifications, and that's what you'll be looking at here. So high school students, and those are primarily students taking a class for both high school and college credit. That's a dual credit student. But these numbers may also include high school students who are not requesting credit from their high school and are taking the class for college credit. So they may have even, as seniors completed their credits well in advance of their last year and be taking this just for high school credit. It's a smaller percentage, but just want to remind you it's two populations. Then you'll also see credential seeking students. Those are students that have graduated from high school and are taking courses towards a certificate, diploma, or degree. And then our workforce students who have different reasons essentially for being in the class but are receiving credit. The other piece you have to remember is what are credit hours? These are not people when you look at these numbers. These are the number of credit hours in a class. So often our classes are 3 credit hours times the number of students taking that class. So if you have a 3 credit hour class and 20 students taking it, that class has 60 credit hours. So this is a function of the number of students taking classes times the number of hours of students. But it is a good way to be able to sort of compare apples to oranges. The other thing to remember is that if you have a high school teacher teaching a dual credit class, that high school teacher has been credentialed by the community college to meet the same faculty requirements that they would hire a teacher for to teach their college class. They are using the same syllabus and materials as the individual would use in the college classroom. And the course will have the same examination. So I'm sorry, somebody needs to mute. Thank you. So the course will have the same final examination or everything else. It will be equivalent to the class that was taught on campus. That said, to Regent Fletcher's point, sometimes, you have to be a prophet from 15 miles away. So a student may or may not interpret that class on their high school campus in the same way. But we hold students to the same drop dates, we hold them to the same withdrawal policies, we hold them to the same student code of conduct. And with that, I'll ask Alicia to take us through the enrollments and where students take classes.
Thank you, Dr. Williams. So as Dr. Williams mentioned, this is a look at the number of credit hours produced, and so it enables us to look at kind of the intensity of how much activity is taking place at each of the locations. So here, what we're really looking at is really similar data to what we saw earlier, but we're looking at the fall 2021 data, and instead of that unduplicated head count, we're looking at credit hours. And since we're only looking at one term, what we did is we really drilled down into this information a little further to look at by the student classification. So this top chart table here is for high school students. Where are they taking their classes? So in addition to that online and in-person piece that we saw before, we've drilled down into whether a student is taking a class off campus. If they are on campus, are they on campus in that fully in-person course, or are they on campus in a hybrid format? And then the online piece. So again, we can see this data by college here. And what we're seeing for the high school students is about 55% of the overall population at Kctcs is taking their credit hours off campus versus 19% on campus. And that on campus piece again is broken out by the hybrid versus the more fully in person. And then we see that about a little over a quarter of those credit hours are taken online. But you do see that there's a wide variation across our colleges. So just looking at those first 2 colleges, for example, at Ashland, 74% of the credit hours for high school students were taken off campus versus less than 10% at Big Sandy. So if you'll scroll down a little bit, the next population here is that credential seeking population. So those are that traditional freshmen and sophomores that Dr. Handy was speaking about earlier. So you see a real a difference here in that less than 1% at the system level are taking classes off campus for those credential seeking populations. So here we really see students are either taking classes on campus or online. And in fall 2021, that impacted, which was impacted heavily still by COVID, 60% of those credit hours were taken online versus 41% taken on campus. And again, you see about half those on-campus credit hours in that hybrid model versus the more fully in-person. And then the last bucket of the population, scroll down a little bit more, you'll see that other non-credential seeking. And so here we're talking about, visiting students, so students from a university that may be taking a class with us, or workforce, or somebody who's taking a class, one class to get the skills that they need, but not necessarily seeking a credential. And here again, you'll see pretty similar to the credential seeking population. Very few of those credit hours were taken off campus. Some of that is a product of COVID. So typically we would have more workforce courses taken at a place of business, but we didn't see that happen as much during COVID. And then we see about 51% of those other non-credential credit hours happening on campus versus a little less than 50% happening online. So I'm happy to take questions.
So that's, as I look down at that last spreadsheet, the other non-credential, there's a lot of empty buckets in the off-campus. So give me an example of a course that maybe could be filling one of those zeros.
So a workforce solutions course that would be, teaching a certain skill set to folks who are employed at a certain company. So, going into a manufacturing facility and teaching a skill set relative to that manufacturing workforce at that company.
It could also be, it could also be for students who are, say, university students, but they are taking a class over a break or over the summer at the college. So they are not actually looking for one of our credentials, but they are taking classes they can transfer back to their home institution.
So when it comes to student success, given this kind of data, is there anything that jumps out at any of you as to areas where we may be able to improve student success as a result of where these students are taking their courses? We're really, again, as Ty said earlier, we're just looking at enrollment here. We're not looking at outcomes or successes with those. I think that's going to be the next step in this conversation, and perhaps what we now want to do is follow up with some data on achievement of those credentials or achievement, successful completion of those credit hours based on this data. What do you all think about that idea? I see Russ shaking his head, and Ty, I see your hand up again. Dr. Handy, I'm sorry.
That's fine. You call me Ty. And this is sort of related to this. What concerns me about the proportion of online students that we're serving these days is the difficulty we have in getting beyond what I'll call the historical K through 12 culture of dual credit, which is only your best and brightest take those courses. And what that results in is a very, very low matriculation rate of these students to our colleges. Most of them, the majority of them, are university-bound students who are picking up general education or other courses that they want to take while in the high school. And it's very, very difficult to get into the high schools and get the counselors and the principals and others to understand that there's this group of students who are going to graduate in the 50th to 80th percentile of their class. Those students are probably not university bound, and we need to be finding opportunities for them to taste what college is going to be like in advance. We're making some inroads there, but it is a very difficult proposition. And I think that's there are a lot more people going to college than are graduating in the top 10 or 20% of these high school classes. And that's been a challenge for us. It's been a challenge for me at every college I've ever been at. Kentucky's not unique. Kentucky's probably a little bit worse about it, though, because there is this notion that college only exists at the university. in Kentucky, and that's a culture that's more embedded here than I find in other states that I've been at.
And quite
It has taken.
But that's an awesome point that you make. And so maybe we set one of our student success goals as being just that, to, be able to recruit more of those students who maybe are lower performing academically, but still obviously have skills that take them forward with a little help. So
yeah, I would rather see a goal be set not around the proportion of students who transfer to us, but the depth with which we're able to reach into the high schools and teach students who have, who may not be that 26 ACT student or what have you. In other words, the market penetration as opposed to market breadth or what have you with those students, because we'll get those students naturally if we're helping those ones who struggle in high school some. And that may also involve taking remedial developmental coursework into the high schools as well, in order to help those students.
Very
So,
good. I think
Ty
Dr. had a comment. Yes.
But so Ty went from one perspective, if you will, in terms of the history or tradition of the more elite students, if you will, getting the opportunity for dual credit. Certainly not just exclusive to the West, but I'm sure for several of my colleagues, including lower socioeconomic areas, rural areas, dual credit has become more almost like a dual credit arms race, where honors nights, the superintendents and the principals brag about thousands of hours of credit without a pathway to completion. So we, and certainly my colleagues, have spent quite a bit of time shifting that mindset to intentionality, having pathways to completion, certainly is one important piece. The second piece, though, as Alicia was sharing the off-site locations and that type of thing, I hover there for a moment because, like in our case, we probably have about 20 off-site locations. 7 of those are online specifically. A factor there is the qualifications of the high school student faculty being able to be certified, meeting the SACS requirements as well too. So when we look at this data in terms of off campus, I think the locations will vary based on the credentialing of the faculty. Then my last point is, as part of our ongoing efforts, we meet twice a year with all the counselors and administrators interested in dual credit or participating in it, to do those quality assurance type standards. And we also do a observation where we have faculty observing those that are qualified to teach in the high schools as well.
Thank you so much. Dr. Linden.
Thank you. I too wanted to speak to Dr. Reese's point about strategic pathways and really working with our high schools on developing those pathways that students might be interested in. We have a wonderful opportunity at Hazard because our technical campus serves as the area technology center for Perry County. So we have high school students on our campus every day of the week, and we look at what pathways they might be interested in. We have a healthcare pathway, automotive, and so forth. So we do have that opportunity to develop that engagement and really work with that cohort group of students. But at the same time, we have to continue to educate not only the students, but the parents about the opportunities that are available. We also do bring our superintendents, our principals, our counselors onto the campuses. But it's, again, looking at what jobs are available in our local areas. And because many times our students want to stay in the local area. Some do want to leave. So we also have to look at what pathways we can work at that way as well. But really strategically looking at what we offer as Kctcs that those high school students might want to transition into. We've recently been promoting the For Free Nursing campaign at Hazard, where we're really trying to help the high school students understand that they can take those 4 prerequisites for our RN program. They can get the Work Ready Scholarship and the Kentucky Dual Credit Scholarship, then transition over to HCTC. They'll get the adult work ready scholarship and essentially most likely be able to get their RN degree tuition free. So we just promotion of opportunities and pathways like that. It's continually educating those students and counselors and principals. One thing I did want to mention that's sort of a best practice that we have found that's helped us somewhat with success rates with the students who are taking online is the high schools will, and this also probably goes back to the fact that many of our students don't have access to broadband at home, but what our high school started doing is having a set time for them to work on their online dual credit course. And everyone in that course will be in the room at the same time in the computer lab. And there's maybe a proctor who goes in and out and makes sure that if they're having any kind of technical difficulty, but they have a set time that they are working on that. And that's been helpful for us. Just wanted to throw that out there. I think there's tons of best practices like that around the colleges.
Very good. Well, thank you for sharing that. And maybe some best practices in areas that could be expanded across the system to other colleges. So again, I'm sure you all are sharing that information in the PLT and some of the other committees that meet across the state, but very good information. So I think from this particular, the student success area here, another action item that I'm hearing is some follow-up with success rates on credential completers for those students who do take dual credit. So again, not looking at the enrollment piece as a measure of success, but the actual student success as the measure of success. So very good. And Hannah, when we're finished with this meeting, perhaps you and I can take a few minutes to just kind of, along with Dr. Williams, to kind of make more concise some of these action items that we're going to move forward to the next meeting.
Absolutely.
Okay. So the next thing on our agenda, now I see a hand up, but I cannot tell who that is. Do you guys see a hand? Oh, it's gone now.
That's
okay.
me, Regent Fletcher, Fernando Figueroa. Just some context as well around dual credit in terms of funding and the way that the state is structured. Right now, the state is not structured for success in early college. I spent most of my career prior to coming to Kentucky and Texas, and they are properly structured for early college, which is why they have so many opportunities for their students for this kind of thing with different varieties depending on the kind of student that they're served. Currently, I think Ty is absolutely right. We're probably we need to verify this, but we're probably mimicking the national average of more people that would go to college and that are already middle class or upper middle class are taking advantage of dual credit than are minority students and students of color. And first time in college students are not yet engaged in this process as well as the design was supposed to be for. Another flaw in our current version is, and we're experiencing this with our regional universities, is as the amount of money goes up per dual credit, we're going to go from 33 to 40 and now I think 50 if this current budget holds. That is actually encouraging our universities to get more involved in dual credit. And what we're finding out here at Gateway is that our matriculation is strongest among our career and technical education dual credits. And so that makes a lot more sense for us to perhaps examine and explore as part of future advocacy, how do we coordinate with KDE, with Kentucky Department of Education and the area technical centers and the other strategies that we have around career and technical education to align ourselves so that there is an early college model that maximizes the best of what we can do. And that also we determine as a state, and again, I'm going to, this is a writ large, but as a board of consequence in the state of Kentucky, I think the Regents have a voice in this. What is the post-secondary strategy of the state of Kentucky? And how does it leverage early college to make the most of what resources we have as a state? So having this conversation as a state, not just at Kctcs.
Very good. As we all know, very little of what we do is in isolation, right? People are watching, people are paying attention. Taxpayers want to know that their money is being put to good use, and legislators want to know that their allocations are getting more people into the workforce, and all very good points, and definitely something that we need to expand the conversation on. Thank you for that point. Okay, so the next thing on our agenda is an EID initiative for student success. So at this point, any of you can jump into this. It's just, I'm throwing out the question to start the conversation, but how are we managing ensuring that equity, inclusion, and diversion is a part of every course, every curriculum, every program that we are putting our students through? Are we doing things like including at least one culturally competent assignment in each course? Are we, I know we ask students to take, is it 3 hours in their programs of, you know, a culturally relevant, help me out with the words, Dr. Williams. Are we ensuring that every student leaving Kctcs has had the opportunity to participate and to reflect on equity, inclusion, and diversity?
So let me maybe provide a little framework, and then I know the presidents can speak to what's happening at their institutions. We do have essentially a cultural competency requirement for courses in our cultural studies requirement in our Associate of Art and Associate of Science, and those do transfer on to the universities. Our Associate of Applied Science degrees do not currently have a cultural competency requirement, except as it's infused throughout the work people do with employers and that sort of thing. So this past year, we have had a work group made up of faculty from each institution, but across disciplines. So not all cultural studies faculty, not all technical faculty, not all general education faculty. They've come up with 4 recommendations that are working through right now the shared governance process of going before various peer teams and then before our faculty senate this month. And those recommendations do include some real broadening around cultural competency. So if you don't mind, I would like to wait until the faculty senate has a moment to opine on that, and then maybe bring those 4 recommendations to this work group so you all understand and see the process on that. That said, separately, we have a requirement from the Council on Post-Secondary Education to set and meet specific diversity goals. So that includes the diversity of our student population and their success, the diversity of our employees, their success, and the goal of making a diverse community on the campus itself or in the online environment. Each college has to write an annual plan to those diversity goals, and that's the matrix of goals that you'll find under the human resources, is where each college is on the benchmark of their diversity goals. That's it's down a couple more items in your agenda, but it includes the student as well as employee goals. The state of Kentucky has legislation that if colleges do not meet their diversity goals, then the Council on Post-Secondary Education can prevent them from applying to add any new programs of study to their inventory until they meet those goals, unless they're able to successfully appeal. And that barrier to adding new programs is for a year. So that's just kind of what impacts every college. And then I know each college takes steps on its own.
And what kind of initiatives are you seeing that, I know those are forthcoming, you're saying those are forthcoming from the Faculty Senate, but are we seeing programs that are more successful?
So the recommendations that are coming through this process are more around the competencies that our students should graduate with. That's also part of larger work with the Council on Post-Secondary Education, as they are working to define all of the competencies a Kentucky higher education graduate should have. But it's also sort of one of the recommendations is to move from the idea of cultural studies more to direct cultural competencies that would help ensure a student's success in the workforce. Another is around how those cultural competencies might be better infused in the technical program students' curriculum. So they're fairly broad. They're fairly broad competencies, but because they've not completed, I'm happy to share the written version of them, but I can't tell you exactly where they're going to go. It may be that Faculty Senate asks them to go back and in the fall term, spend a little more time refining one or more of them. But I believe the committee has done some really good work that will strengthen what is already good work on our campuses.
Very good. Well, thank you for that. And so knowing that that's forthcoming, we'll kind of table this until the next meeting. And once we hear those, decide if we need to take any further action. Again, just making sure, and if that's with the Faculty Senate, that is across the system, correct? That's going to include all colleges. So that one
Yes.
can be tabled. Okay.
And the board would actually, if graduation requirements were changed, the board would actually vote on those requirements.
Okay. Very good. And when do you expect those to be published or?
The Senate Council meeting is in 2 weeks on Friday, the 22nd. So I could certainly then, I'm happy to share the 4 recommendations. Those are out there now for faculty to look at, but I can't share where Senate might, what action Senate might take until after the 22nd.
Okay. So as long as our next meeting is after that, you'll have an update for us the next time. We'll just make that the action item that you'll update us at the next meeting.
Happy to do so.
Thank you. And again, trying to be very thoughtful in how we put this agenda together and to make sure that these topics really do flow and to be respectful of your time. And we've already been here an hour and a half. I do want to transition pretty quickly into the conversation to carry on the conversation perhaps from the last board meeting of the Board of Regents, which was discussion on alignment of personnel, positions, job descriptions, and other efficiency ideas, including equity, inclusion, and diversity of our faculty as well as our staff. As Regent Damaris has made very clear, our human resources are really our greatest assets, and we want to make sure moving forward as a Board of Regents that we recognize the good work that's being done across the state by not only our presidents and their cabinets, but the folks who work with them in the local colleges. And we're a little bit concerned perhaps that people do not feel as appreciated as they should. And we all know that money talks, and we have been working very hard as a Board of Regents to figure out ways to be able to give, those bumps in the salaries that people are so desperately needing right now, recognizing that it's been years since there have been pay raises across the system, and then understanding that, good merit should also return good pay. And part of that conversation has been the way that the colleges choose to use their budgets or choose to appoint things like their cabinets, choose to align their departments. And we're just looking for ways as a whole to be a little more efficient there. Again, kind of falling back to my quality years, when there's a lot of variance, there tends to be opportunity for improvement. And one of the things that I would like for us to talk about is how we can align personnel across the system so that each college has those core positions in place, that we're calling them the same thing, that they're doing similar work, and then that they are being paid equitably across the system. And so I know that's a huge topic, and we will need to break that down part by part. But I would like for someone here to kind of start the conversation as to where you see that we could improve efficiencies in personnel, in human resources, or maybe even in the way that human resources is managed across the system. Any thoughts on that topic in general? Not everyone at once.
Yeah, so I'll start. One of the things that we've tried to do, I think, has been to establish a market rate, and the minimum and the maximum, but really to get around a market rate, because, to hire someone at Hazard is going to be different than what it's going to take to hire somebody here in northern Kentucky. And so I think market rate has been an attempt to do that by region, to provide an example of that. But, that's difficult when, faculty and or staff look at, well, what's the difference in pay between someone at Louisville and someone at Big Sandy? And they can look at dollars as dollars rather than dollars within their larger context. So that might be a way to think about how does the market rate explanation get clarified and look at it by region to determine, what that makes sense. The other thing, Regent Fletcher, I think that, we've been asked by, I think as an industry, as a sector, higher education is asked to become more entrepreneurial. And one of the things that, as you know, as an entrepreneur, is you work with what you got and you create the model to work with the system as you have it. And I think that our colleges have done an exceptional job of scanning where they are, the number of personnel that they need to have focused on different efforts within the constraints of, and again, I'll say it, over the last 10 years, slashes in budget, loss of over 1,000 people across the system. It is, I think it's important within that context to understand that we have been as efficient with resources as we possibly can be in these environments. I think we've all felt that as colleges, we're at the marrow of our situations and we're no longer cutting into the fat. We're really cutting into lean when we talk about, any kind of cut. So that's why this year's budget is particularly encouraging, is because we'll have a chance to think of it a different way. But within our, I know at Gateway, we're always thinking of how do we work with and in the environment of a UC, with an NKU, and how do we, present ourselves in a creative way within the guidelines that we have. Now, I do believe there is opportunity in this new VP at Kctcs over human resources and equity is going to be a huge move forward. I think that there's a real opportunity to think of the framework that allows the overall structure, right, infrastructure, and how we should think about these things, but also the flexibility and timely responsiveness to how we address our specific needs as we adjust in our environments. To hamstring us or to create a framework in which we've got to pigeonhole things and check certain boxes is not going to give your colleges a chance to be as entrepreneurial as they can be.
And certainly we do not want to hamstring anyone. We want to support the good work that's going on in the local colleges. As a board, one of the things we're looking at and one of the things we're hearing about from the front lines is that things like structure, things like functions within the colleges, people doing the same jobs in 3 different colleges may have a different title, maybe not just because of market, but maybe are not being held to the same standards, or are not being, the expectations for the same job description across the system is perhaps not the same.
And that's where, yeah, and I hear that, and I just think that we're going to need to pay attention to that really carefully, because having a title at Gateway may have very different implications than having that same title at Western.
And there's the opportunity. So is there an opportunity to say, okay, if you are, and it's probably a terrible example, but I'll throw it out, a chief academic officer, is that job description the same across the system? And as a system, are we supporting the continuity across the across all the colleges?
That's exactly, and I think you're onto something there, Regent Fletcher, is you look at the statewide strategy, right, which is what we started with, right? We're supposed to be created to have this, statewide strategy coordinated and understood. And then that, and so my recommendation would be that this is the research with the new VP to focus on the classification process and the framework, and to engage the peer teams, especially the HRDs across the peer teams. They're ready and willing for this conversation, to create a framework which provides the rationality of the individual regions with answering, number one, right, the question of perception of fairness and clarity of function within each institution and across the system. I think that would be my preference.
Yeah, if I could interject and add two points. So first, let me tackle the cabinet level, the administration, because I know that that's been a big area of focus. I think first, so SACS provides us some guidance that there are certain key administrative positions already outlined, which, my words, would involve the usual suspects: the president, CAO, chief business officer, chief student affairs officer, etc. Within the Kctcs, as it is stated, I think certain wording like having a minimum of those to meet the accreditation requirements certainly is a great starting place for commonality across the system, regardless of the size of the school. So that's point one. The second part, though, embedding that though, is this. Where I get a little concerned, though, with a magic number. So, for example, Henderson's our smallest school. Jason may have, I don't know, 6 people on his cabinet. I have 10. Part of the staffing of my cabinet has as much to do with really sketching and assessing the regional needs. So, for example, unlike probably most of my colleagues, I'm dealing with a tri-state area, including the media markets. So my director of marketing is on cabinet because of the importance of us constantly feeling the different media releases, et cetera. That may not be a need in Hazard. So there needs to be some flexibility that, because the cabinets may appear to be bloated, if you will, isn't an automatic equation that we are wasting effort or maximizing people. I think, second, if you move from cabinet to the example of equity across the system. So again, this is where I think size of schools come into play as well. If you come up with a common position, for example, director of X. So at a small school like Henderson, the marketing person may be the same as the advancement person as, right, because of the size. Whereas in our case, we deal with a larger volume as well. So I think even though you could come up with common names, you can still run into problems, though, at different schools because of the efficiency and quite frankly, the budgetary constraints. You're going to have people doing multiple positions. That is why I've been emphasizing since I took this role, trying to get as many people cross-trained where necessary. I think cross-training is one way of addressing maximizing, so that you don't always have like just a series of specialists. I think that there's certainly opportunities to do things like that. And for most of us, if you go back and look at the data, which I think bears us out, I think right up to our peak around the recession timeframe, enrollments was plush, right? And so we had pretty sizable staffs and growth. But then certainly over the decade plus, many of us have lost FTE positions quite significantly that have never been replaced and probably will never be replaced. And that is why we're pushing for cross-training as well.
And then we're looking at areas of the state where we have diminishing populations, and this is the perfect opportunity to take a look and say, how many people should a director really be directing, or how many cabinet members does it take to manage, and how many students do you need to support those functions, given a particular area of the state, or, and I think that we've been a little bit hamstrung by the idea of maintaining so many separate positions in all of these different colleges. And this is where the conversation that we learned about in the last board meeting maybe comes to play, in that we have an opportunity to maybe restructure a little bit and look at some hub functions that would serve multiple schools, and maybe alleviate the burdens of those budgets that are smaller, or the number where the colleges have fewer numbers of students. This is an opportunity for us to look at, again, streamlining, being more efficient, maybe rolling some of those functions under a similar umbrella for 2 or 3 schools that maybe can't support those larger cabinets or those larger budgets. So I appreciate that insight. Dr. Handy, I see your hand up.
Yes, so specifically to that comment about hubs and sharing of resources, I think I was going to talk about something else, but since you just said that, being at the largest institution or what have you, I haven't had a lot of need for this, but I do sense that the system office itself has strategically positioned itself oftentimes to provide that deeper bench for those schools. In other words, they've served, say in marketing or in advancement, they've served as a greater, they've served that hub function. And I'm not saying it shouldn't be sent out into the various regions of the state, but I think that has been acknowledged. And I can tell because I have people complaining to me from my college that we're not getting the same service that a Henderson or somebody else might be getting from the system. And I know why. It's scale. And I have no problem with it whatsoever. And so I think some of that has vicariously happened. And it's happened quietly rather than, it certainly has happened intentionally, but it has happened in a way not to be so regionally directed. I think the problem, my biggest fear is we move, if we're not careful, we move towards a formula of some sort system-wide. And that takes away the flexibility. And I don't intend this to be sarcastic, but if you show me an organization that assigns its critical tasks based upon job descriptions and who's supposed to do what, and not based upon talent and the ability of those people to get that job done, or talent development, the opportunity to develop somebody, then I think it's a less effective sort of system. And so in that area, I am very much for as much autonomy as can potentially be provided, and then hold the CEO at each campus accountable, because they're the ones who have to, at the end of the day, have to show progress and have to show success. I separate that piece from the compensation piece that I think is getting sort of embedded with this, where I do see the importance of not perfect consistency, but logical consistency among the colleges, among the regions, and that sort of thing. And I think our new administration, I'll say it quite bluntly, Paul in the role that he's in now recognizes this need for change. And so I think we all know this as presidents. Historically, when we meet to discuss next year's budget, the last thing that's talked about is salary increases. We go through we're presented with the utility increase and this fixed cost. Oh, and there's no money left over for salary increases. And I think new leadership understands that is not an effective model going forward. Fortunately, the timing is perfect with a good budget this year, and we're stepping ourselves out. We're going to be able to take a real positive step and hopefully carry that momentum into future years. And I think that's a separate issue. And the new person in this vice presidency role really has the challenge of how do we make sure we get the most bang for that buck as we're investing that in our people, creating loyalty, honoring service, and helping to handle the compression issue, while at the same time making sure every employee gets something close to a cost of living adjustment, a COLA, and not a diet COLA or nothing whatsoever. And I think we've had too many years of that, and that pent up stress over that may be clouding this other side, this discussion on the other side a little bit about what people do and consistent job descriptions. I think they're two separate issues and they get attacked two different ways. And I think there's room to improve in both of those areas, but we do have to recognize scale matters. How colleges organize is going to matter based on their employers, who they're serving, their mix of students, technical, gen ed, that sort of thing. And there's just going to be it's going to be very difficult to consolidate or create a tremendous amount of consistency among 16 colleges as diverse as ours. I think that's a difficult thing to do, and we may find ourselves less efficient rather than more efficient, chasing that path too rigorously.
Thank you for those comments. Jennifer Linden.
Thank you. One thing about presidents is you can never get us to hush. So once we all get started, we all have plenty of comments, but I appreciate the opportunity to be able to share and advise this team. I really do. I think all of the presidents are much in favor of the much needed salary increase across the board for all of Kctcs employees. We're very much in favor of that, and it's long overdue. I do agree. A couple of notes I jotted down on the point about consistency. Seems like there is a lot of confusion across the board about titles and working titles and specific job duties. Although you may have that same title at different institutions, and I know there's different needs at institutions, but I think much can be said about some better consistency. One thing that I jotted down, being in a rural area, and we've certainly reduced the number of full-time faculty and staff that we have here at Hazard from 270 about 3 years ago to 240. Now we're down to around 180, depending on what day you pull the report of full-time faculty and staff. And I don't see being able to replace a large majority of the positions that we've lost. So we're really looking at how can we be more efficient. And one thing that we are experimenting with, along with Big Sandy and Southeast, is shared web services. So there is a new person at the system office who has some other duties, but also they are taking care of the web pages for Hazard, Southeast, and Big Sandy. And this is kind of new, so we're seeing how that works. But I do think there's opportunities, especially for the smaller schools, for other positions to be looked at and additional shared services. And of course, at the same time, we all want to make sure that our individual college needs will be addressed. But I do think there's opportunity there. And one final note I jotted down, along with salary increases, when you're trying to attract new talent into the area, and if you do have a position you can post and fill, it's always concerning for us at the smaller schools and in the small areas to really look at what other incentives we can give, whether it's flex schedules, whether it's discretionary remote work, what opportunities do we have there to allow people to maybe work some from home and attract that new talent, or maybe get all of their hours in 4 days a week. What are some opportunities there? And we have a wide array of benefits that we offer, and our benefits are marvelous, but what else could we do, like those flexible schedules, like tuition opportunities to get tuition reimbursement and assistance. So I do think there's more work that we can do there in that area. What are other incentives that we can offer to attract new talent and keep the good talent that we already have? Besides the salary increase, what else can we do?
And those are the kinds of ideas that this committee is really being charged with looking at. Do we need more of a cafeteria type benefits package where people can choose, I need daycare reimbursement, or I need long-term health care, or I need disability, and let them kind of pick benefits, for example. We know that in other industries that is a little bit of a recruitment tool. It's not always about the money. Sometimes the benefits do make a really big difference. So again, looking at that, the scale of function is an interesting conversation. Do we set ourselves up for failure in the equity conversation whenever we do have a school that maybe only has 2,000 students versus the services that can be provided to a student in a school that has, 15 or 20,000 students? And so again, as a board, we're looking at this with a very, very wide lens to say, where are those opportunities and how can we assure that a student at Hazard is getting the same, benefits or the same experience as a student at Jefferson or a student at Gateway. So again, none of this is anyone saying anything, anyone's doing anything wrong. It's just we need to step away from being an individual school and take a look at how we can be a better system sometimes, but taking those best practices from those individual schools and then applying them across the system. And so I know I feel sorry for whoever is coming in as the new VP, because we all just keep saying, oh, this person's going to take care of this. And boy, do they have a big plate in front of them to fill. But this is where the conversations get started. And I really appreciate the thoughtfulness of everyone who has participated today. I again want to be respectful. We're going on 2 hours here. We do have a couple of other things on the agenda, and they're kind of big topics actually. And so with your permission, and I don't want to overlook Dr. Williams, who's had her hand up so patiently, go ahead and say what you were going to say.
I was just letting you know that I have contacted Ivy Tech for a list of their hubs so that we can compare our current list of shared services against those hubs as a data point.
That is that something you'll be able to share in an electronic format? Maybe before the next meeting?
It depends on when Ivy Tech sends their things. I'll reach back out to them. They haven't been able to respond yet, but as soon as they do, I can certainly, we have our list, so we can certainly share that.
Okay, thank you for that. So again, being respectful of your time, I'm going to kind of breeze through these next couple of items, and then hopefully we'll be able to pick these up at the next meeting. Our charge is large, but our time is short. And so we're going to have a lot of work to do here over the next 30 to 45 days. And I don't want these are all very important. I don't want any of these to not get the attention that they deserve. And I love how engaged that you all are. I knew when Chair Damaris chose this team that she did it very thoughtfully, and she was right on par as usual. So we do want to talk about the EID college performance CPE diversity metrics, and those have been made reference to, and I would ask that you all look through the document that is in the agenda today. Prior to our next meeting, we will pick up with that the next time. And then the conversation about property utilization, and what I really wanted to touch base with you on there. I know each individual college would be able to say what's going on within their campuses and how you all are looking at space utilization. I wanted to pitch the idea of actually requesting a formalized study of space on the campuses by an outside or third party, working in conjunction with the presidents and their cabinets to determine the best use of space long term, and to see if, very much like an Ivy Tech, we might be able to unload some space that maybe is not being utilized, or reimagine some space that we have an opportunity to use in a different way, things of that nature. But one of the highest costs, as you all know, is that deferred maintenance and all of those costs associated with buildings that, as our numbers have fleshed out today, so many of our students are online now. We probably do not need the big property footprint that we currently have in many of our areas. Now, in some areas, we may need more, but in some of our areas, we probably could downsize and not be hurting any services by doing so. So I really want you to be thinking about that, whether or not you would be willing to support or recommend as a committee here back to the board that we do a formal review of some sort of formal study with an outside vendor to take a look at our property. Okay, because we have quite a bit. And then I really was hoping that we'd be able to establish a couple of goals today. I know we've talked about a couple of goals, particularly with student success, and then we've just hit on the employee retention and recruitment and satisfaction and pay. I do have a comment about compression. It seems like every time, and we've unfortunately talked about it multiple times in my short tenure on the board, it seems that we keep moving the market, but I don't know that that really helps compression. And I keep hearing from our faculty members and from our staff members, you can move the market all day, but if you're not moving the people to the level of the market, you still have compression. And I totally could see that after the last presentation we were given. We can project the market of 10% above where it currently is, or whatever that number would be, and we can move people up 3 or 4%, but that's still going to keep that compression far below the market if we keep moving the target. I want to move the people. I don't want to move the target. I want to move the people toward the target. And I feel like when we talk about it, compression is always a big issue. It's a lot of numbers. It's a lot of math. It's very complicated. And you're right. Someone made the comment about maybe addressing the market and why there is variability from Hazard to Henderson and, everywhere in the middle, what it means, cost of living wise. I live in Moorhead. we're looking at cost of living here not improving. It isn't anywhere, but it certainly isn't here. I have a college student who lives in an apartment, and we're looking at rentals for 1 or 2 bedroom rentals being $1,000 a month in little old Moorhead. It's not. I don't think that those cost of living costs are really as big as they used to be from urban to rural areas. Our problem in rural areas is we have less capacity. We have less space. So our demand is pretty high and our supply is pretty low. In those urban areas, same kind of an issue, I understand, but I don't think those cost of livings are quite so diverse as they used to be. And, you can't just live an hour outside of Lexington and not expect to be paying very similar rents, actually. And so I really don't want us to keep chasing this market goal or this idea that moving the market is going to help our people. It's still compressing our long-term employees, our long-term faculty. It's still keeping people well below the market. I've had 15 to 20-year faculty members call me and say, you can move the market, but I'm still going to retire well under the market, not even be at a median pay range by the time I retire after 25 or 27 years. And that's depressing. It's hard for morale. I really want to see us really get more aggressive in being creative with ways to advance our folks and not just keep chasing this market number. So we need to set some human resource goals. We need to set a couple of student success goals. And then the next meeting, we need to set a couple of physical plant efficiency goals. And whether that be, with utilities or that be with actual physical space, that's really what I want to charge this group with is, can we land on any unified thoughts about where we want student success goals to go today? Can we do that? With the information we've been given, is there anything, for example, the quality assurance program for online learning, is that a reasonable goal to come out of today with, to say that moving forward we'd like to see a system-wide quality assurance program for online learning? I see a couple of head nods.
Yeah, I think so.
I think that's we're good with, the idea of developing standards and frameworks across the system with the 16 colleges, and anything we can do to kind of come together as a system around these things, I think is going to benefit to Dr. Williams' point that, shared governance is the strongest way to get us where we want to go in a way that's consistent and persistent.
I'm all for shared governance, but sometimes it feels like, to me, shared governance is something that we talk about, but we don't really put to action. It seems like, and I think the perception out there sometimes is that we have these local groups at our colleges, but it never really goes above that the decisions are still really just being made from the top down. And I want this committee, as diverse and as inclusive as we are being with just this committee, I want that to be the case across the system. I don't want anyone to feel like that their voice isn't heard or that their opinion isn't respected, or that, somebody's coming into it with an ulterior motive or some other agenda. I really, and that's what I love about these work groups like this, is we really get to flesh out some interesting points, and educating one another about those different perspectives is just as important as the final product, I think, a lot of times. This is just to start the conversation maybe in a different direction. There's always going to be resistance to changing the way we've always done things, and that's okay. We're not afraid of that. I know that all of you all engage in those conversations at the local level every day, but now we want to say, okay, some of us are doing really, really well within the system, but now we need to make the entire system better. And that's the perspective that you all are going to bring to this that I'm really looking for. We as a Board of Regents, while we have statutory authority to delegate some of this or to direct some of this, we just really want to know what's your perspective, and what you bring to us is going to inform our decisions. So we're here to help you. We're here to support you. We're here to support the system and to support those human resources out there, you know, our people are our most valuable asset, and we want to make sure they understand that we're doing everything we can to help them with that, as well as student success being our number one priority. That's our mission. And so anything we can do, you know, within this committee to move those goals forward, I'm all about. So, okay, so the quality program for online learning, that's definitely, it sounds like everybody seems like to think that's reasonable. I can't see everybody, but if we could just like maybe a quick show of hands, if you support the idea of that goal being a goal for student success. Yes. Yep. Dr. Williams. Thank you. Okay. Is your hand up as well to speak, or just to say
No,
yes?
it was my little tiny hand up so you could see it. Right.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. And then what about inclusion of cultural competency throughout the coursework? You know, even if it was just a single assignment within each course, I don't want to tell faculty how to teach their course or what to cover, but would it be a reasonable expectation that cultural competency be addressed, even if it was just a single assignment within a course?
With respect, I really feel like you're going too far with that request. I think we can set a set of expectations, but that's taking it to a level that's very discreet and really not.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair. Okay.
I think it might be of value to, and I don't know that we've seen the 16 college DEI plans kind of placed together, and a sense of how that overlays with data regarding diversity in those communities, and getting a feel for the programs that have been established or in the process of being established, you know, at the colleges, and then think of it as a statewide strategy to be able to communicate how we are engaging this very challenging conversation of EDI in the state of Kentucky.
And I think, and because I'm focused on this every single day, it is so much bigger than being able to check a box and say, we've added this to a course. I'm sorry, it's cultural, it's how you operate your, you know, it's how the college operates, and it's not just what students experience, it's what everybody experiences that makes the difference. And so I think what CPE has done with these programs really gets closer to what we would like to see in terms of all of our colleges than some sort of checklist for what's in a curriculum or something. And I'm sorry to be negative like that, but I think that's just too easy to do.
I don't think that's negative at all, and I
Okay.
think it's a wonderful comment. And I would really say I would like to see Kctcs lead by example here.
Yeah.
So, and that's a big part of the conversation we've been having today, is ensuring that across our system there is, you know, this being addressed, not just in what we're teaching the students, but in how we're operating and how we're functioning at each of the colleges. So no, there's no negativity there, or I don't perceive it. If there was, I will maybe change my framework there.
Thanks.
I don't see that as negative at all. Okay, so perhaps we set a goal of taking a look at those 16 different plans and seeing where we can enmesh them into a broader conversation, into a broader, not a directive, but a broader goal.
I would agree with that, Regent Fletcher, but also remind everybody that we have an infused diversity goal across all of our new strategic plan. It's being evidenced into the action plans, the tactics that are already being under development will be finalized in May, you know, to evidence that, and then it's being proven through the data requirements and metrics and goals that we're setting for that strategic plan. So while I applaud the idea of this group having one, maybe we can step back and look at that one we've in some ways already set for ourselves and see if that meets what you're trying to envision with this group. And if it doesn't, then we could approach it from a different perspective.
I agree.
Okay, and then what about on the human resource front? Any goals or any ideas moving toward a goal that we could set as far as trying to align human resource functions or structures across the system?
Is that, I realize we've just assigned 8 million things to this vice president. Is that part of that work already? Is it more of the board essentially charging that individual with some of these kinds of studies, or to your point, possibly an equity study or some, it might be an external group, it might be an internal process that, I think I don't want to speak in any way for the presidents, but I think certainly there's an understanding that over years, we did our last equity study about 5 or 6 years ago, and we did coalesce a lot of positions. We did a lot of that work, but things change in the interim. Maybe it is time to think about whether that's the appropriate next step or some version of that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I would add to that too, starting their peer groups, like the HR peer group. I mean, the fact is, a new VP coming in is going to rely very heavily on the HR peer members, as an example, to be able to provide some insights, right, and nuances. I think maybe part of our hesitation is, even as presidents, we know where our expertise kind of curbs, and so it'll be easy for us to say X, but the HR folk bring a certain unique expertise. And starting this new VP, given that charge, if you will, helps on the operational side of things. So I think it's a combination of both. Getting access from existing peer groups or equivalents, I think on these 2 or 3 issues will be important updates to have.
So one of the things that was brought up in the last Board of Regents meeting had to do with the benefits that we offer. And, we were told this is where this package came from, and then we went with the state package here. And have we ever really polled our employees? And again, I don't want to take away from the new VP for HR, but at the same time, is maybe one of the things we could look at is actually asking our employees what benefits that they value or what benefits that they would like. That may be a more operational type function, but as I'm thinking about efficiencies and cost containment and all the other things that this group has been charged with, how do we get there? Like we have to, and maybe we revise these goals as we go along, realizing that they don't really do what we were hoping that they would, but could we at least say that we're going to set some kind of plan in motion to take a look at these administrative hubs, look at benefits, look at that whole market conversation, the employee education piece around market and compression. We need to have some direction moving forward. This is a great conversation, but I want something to come out of this more than just a better understanding for those who are present. I want this to result in some positive action for our workforce within Kctcs. So, and the system as a whole. So what would we say that we can do to try to help with that human resource, those human resource goals?
So Regent Fletcher, that already through the All Ears tour, there was a lot of feedback about concern about salaries, and then some basic ideas around benefits. I think working with the human resources directors and what they've heard anecdotally, and with this new vice president, a listing of benefits, ones we give and ones we don't, to understand the value, and even write-ins for, hey, this isn't on the list, but here's one I thought of. I think that sort of survey certainly could happen. I would recommend that if with you and the board's support, that it not happen. And this sounds like I'm pushing it off, but hear me out here. In September, after classes start in the fall, September and October is the time that faculty in particular, but also staff, because students are now in classes, we're not trying to enroll, we're not trying to finish a term. That's a time period that people are very open more to surveys and to having time for reflection and thinking about stuff. If we did a survey right this minute, faculty are going into final exams with their students, staff are trying to get students graduated and enrolled for the next semester. It's just a kind of very stressful time at our colleges right now. So that would give us some time to work with this new person, be prepared, and then have a survey to roll out in fall term as everybody gets back, things get going, and we can really have some time maybe for reflection. And it would still give the Board of Regents time to really think about, as they move forward, the salary discussion for the next year, what those would cost, how they would, what we could make available. We could look into vendor providers, all of the things one has to do when one undertakes something like that.
That's fair. And part of our charge is being able to recommend further study. So it sounds like, just setting the goal that by September, the HR peer group working with the new VP would develop a benefits education program, and then perhaps use that to then dovetail into a survey of benefits that faculty and staff see as beneficial to them, not just what we decide for them. And then maybe reformulate a benefits package going forward into the next budget that's a very worthwhile goal, I think.
Yeah, and then you have, one of the key planks of the strategic plan is the organizational success, which, is looking at how do we make the most use of our talent. And that might be a recommendation for the board, on a periodic scale, when does the board want to be updated on progress in these areas? And, have that schedule out. And so, every third meeting, we want to have what are the latest developments on employee success, and how are we moving in the directions of that we've expressed concern of, and you can have that list: compression, equity, job descriptions, morale and momentum in talent development. Those I think that's a pretty good framework to have the VP and the HRDs and the other peer teams that are involved in this be thinking about. And then the Board of Regents has a way of saying, okay, we're coming up on that meeting when we're going to get the fullest report on employee success and organizational success on the strategic plan.
Very good. So if we get back to the conversation very quickly, and then I'm going to let you go here, on alignment, structures, functions, personnel across the system, do any of you have any areas where you say, as Dr. Linden did, hey, we can resource share when it comes to our web-based services? Do any of the others on this call or have any ideas from your meetings within the PLT or other groups? Do you have any of those low-hanging fruits where you can say, here's an area where there's obvious efficiencies that could be recognized or could be realized?
I do think we've been successful in the financial aid side, and some in the payroll, or we've been successful in the payroll side. And it makes me think that longer term, this whole notion of personnel benefits might be an area that can handle. I mean, the questions are pretty similar probably around all 16 colleges. And so I think there's probably some back office sort of things that could happen there that would be beneficial in that area.
I'll let you know, Dr. Fletcher, that at the last PLT meeting, the president supported a shared hiring of one person to serve in payroll at the system office, because it's been very difficult for the colleges to manage the employee out-of-state taxes. So a person who lives across the state border and the taxes they have to pay versus, if they lived in Kentucky, for example. So that's where I'm hopeful that benchmark list of Ivy Tech, which has these hubs, and our list of shared services, which is fairly lengthy. I mean, if you think about legal counsel, that's a shared service, for example. We have one office of lawyers. Every college doesn't have lawyers. And I think Ivy Tech, you'll probably find some of that is similar to what we do. I think there will be more that become obvious as we're able to look at maybe what we aren't even thinking about, if that makes sense. If we're able to say, well, we hadn't thought about this, but that might make sense.
Well, one of those areas that I had kind of thought about was, what about advising for student success? Instead of trying to, because I'm hearing again from some of the local schools that you may have one or two people responsible for advising, all of the students. What if that was a more centralized function that was shared across, 2 or 3 of these smaller campuses, or a couple of, at least a couple of different campuses. So I don't think we need to just think back office functions. I think we need to think about every function and whether or not it's best to keep it local or if it can be shared in some way, or at least across the system.
That was another area that I was thinking about that I just didn't share, and that it's not so much advising across the entire college, but it is with this greater proportion of online students, how do we structure regional partnerships that get consistency across colleges for the online student. I would be reluctant because advising is so personal in nature when you're dealing with on-campus students. I think a lot of the important stuff would be lost by centralizing that. But when you're dealing with online students, and if 30% of our student population is going to be that, I think that area does sort of beg, and online curriculum development and other sorts of online functions that could probably be pulled together and worked on, if not at the system level, regionally.
Very good. Well, I think this is an awesome start. I'm very encouraged by the conversation that we've had today. I thank you all for your openness and your willingness to share your expertise and to really help to move not only your colleges, but the system forward. We've got a lot of work to do, but we will meet again very soon. So I'm going to have Hannah, after we get everything kind of wrapped up from today, I'm going to have her send out another calendar invite. If there is a particular day or time that is best for you, or if you think that perhaps Friday mornings is a good time for you to meet like this one, we will try to limit the next meeting. I feel like this has gone a little long, but invaluable conversation. We'll try to limit the next meeting to 1 hour, and we will focus on building utilization and consolidation, and also the EID initiatives. We'll circle back on that. So does anyone have anything else that they want to add before we move to adjourn here? Wonderful. All right, I'll entertain a motion. And I think all my regents are gone. So I'll move and we'll be gone. All right. Thank you all so much. You'll hear from us soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thank you all. Bye.